Welcome back to Community Real Estate Talk Show. I'm your host. You're listening to Clay 1180 AM. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited for our next guest, Matthew Gardner. He works with the Washington Center for Real Estate Research and owns his own economic firm where they study unemployment and the housing trends. And this is his second time being on the show. It's just amazing to hear all the tips and everything that he has. He's brilliant, so very excited to have him back. I'm going to patch him through right now. Hey, Matthew, how's it going?
I'm well, Tyler. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. We loved having you last time.
Well, thank you for asking me back on.
How are things going? Is everything still going as planned?
Is it as rosy as I said last time? Yeah, well, generally speaking, yeah. I mean, there's obviously there's always going to be some ups and downs, but right now, the direction I think is still pretty solid, certainly from an economic standpoint. And if I've got any concerns at all, it's pretty much as I talked about last time. I wish there were more homes for sale.
Yeah, we all do.
And so if I look at the market, certainly if we talk about let's say the Seattle metro area, we've still got a very sad lack of available inventory. I mean, we're down almost 36% from 2 years ago. We're a tad higher than we were last year, but the spring bounce that we're all hoping for, not quite there yet.
And last time there was some conversation of the prolonged period of recovery. Are we still in that right now?
Yeah, we are. I mean, there's any matrices that I look at seems to suggest. I know some people have been talking about the fact that the prices have gone up fairly aggressively over the last year or so, and are we getting back into another speculative bubble? I don't see that happening. I still think there's still some ability for prices to move higher, but the rate of appreciation is actually probably going to start slowing. And I, for one, am not sad about that at all.
Yeah, we're still seeing, the little inventory that you'd mentioned earlier, and some of these houses are just going way above and beyond. I mean, working up with buyers in Seattle right now, it's just a challenge. So, but are you expecting that price growth to slow pretty soon?
Well, okay, but it's going to. If you look at actually kind of average sale price, we've been kind of leveling off for a while, but what we saw pretty much actually last spring and through last summer was a situation whereby there was such a shortage of homes to buy. There were an awful lot of people out looking. And so owners, those that were selling real estate, had some very, very high expectations, and they were pushing the list prices up very dramatically. So what you saw is the spread between list and sale price kind of basically get out of whack. Now, however, that slowed down the end of the summer into the fall of last year, and that slowed down through Christmas. It popped up a bit last month. But I think that buyers out there are not necessarily grabbing the first thing there is out there. Together with the fact we're still seeing some issues with appraisals, and appraisals just not coming in. It's less of an issue than it was a couple of years ago. But so we're seeing a bit of a more, should we say, rational market. Prices are going up, certainly, but I think the rate of growth this year is going to be certainly lower than we saw last year.
Do you think they're pricing the homes better?
I think at some point or another, the sellers are having to listen to their agents. I mean, they got away with it, quite frankly, last year because there was so much pent-up demand that we were seeing a lot of situations whereby houses were coming on the market on a Friday, for example, and the listing agent saying at that point, we'll be reviewing offers next Monday. That's way too reminiscent of the markets we saw back in 2005, 6, and 7. Not a good one, not sustainable. So I think that a lot of buyers have just been a little bit more cautious. They're willing to wait with the hope that there will, at some stage, be some more homes for sale. A lot of times also, there was a lot of concern last year that we were going to see interest rates spike very dramatically. That has not yet happened. And as much as I believe the Federal Reserve will continue to slow down, basically interest rates won't go up. As the Federal Reserve slows down the purchase of Treasury bills, the market's got to pick up the slack, and that can have upward pressure on mortgage rates. We saw there's certainly a little bit of a spike, but in general, they are still very, very low. They will ultimately go up, but not as rapidly, I think, as some people are expecting.
Yeah, it's definitely with those rates that low, that's really helping everything continue.
Well, it is. And don't get me wrong, rates are going to go up. I mean, I certainly expect the average 30-year fixed rate by 2016 to be back up around 6%.
Okay.
I think a lot of people are acknowledging that's going to happen. We're just not going to see a rapid increase in those rates. But people's memories are still very, very short. I mean, you go back to 1990, let's say, when rates were, just above 9%. Go back to 1982, they were almost 20%. So it is interesting hearing a lot of people talk about what a terrible world it is when they've got to look at paying 4.5% for a mortgage. Relatively speaking, that is still extremely cheap.
Yeah, it's almost comical, isn't it? We have people that are locking in at 4.5%, and something dips back down and could be 4.25%, but it's still just a great rate.
Oh, it is. I mean, these rates, certainly the rates we saw when we were down in the 3s last year, and even the 4s this year, and they will probably. Our model right now is saying we're going to be knocking on somewhere close to 5% by the end of the year. It is still amazingly low, and rates, quite frankly, we're never going to see again unless something very, very bizarre happens.
And concerns other than the lack of inventory, and hopefully that does pick up, and hopefully with the weather and being springtime, maybe people will start getting the home on the market. What other concerns are out there?
Well, if you talk about housing and specifically about mortgages, I think it's still extraordinarily hard to get a mortgage. Qualifying is still very, very difficult. So if you look at the conventional loan market, FICO scores, although they have come down modestly over the last few months, are still far higher than where, quite frankly, I think they need to be. So hopefully we'll start seeing that move down a little bit, because I think there is still a situation whereby a lot of people would like to buy, they're not qualifying. Now, I'm certainly not saying we've got to get back into the world we saw back in 05 and 06, where, quite frankly, anyone qualified for a mortgage. No one wants to see that, and I hope it never comes back. But it is still very, very difficult. And I think that, to a degree, is also holding the market back a little bit. I think if we start seeing those requirements soften just a little, that's going to be a good thing. But all in all, you have to turn around and say, look, it's what drives the housing market? Well, the economy does. And we are still one of the best markets in the country relative to employment growth. And that's particularly important.
What are your thoughts on, with FHA, I know it's a lower down payment loan, but they've just really raised their costs on everything. The mortgage insurance is super high. Are they getting money back, trying to play catch up with all the money they lost, or what do you see on that?
I think, yes, to a degree, but if you look at FHA as well, their FICO score, their requirements are still a lot lower than anyone else's. Are they trying to a degree, I think there's still some caution out there. Obviously, a lot of people are talking about getting rid of Fannie and Freddie. I don't see that happening. They're providing way too much money to the government, and if you look at privatizing those two GSCs, the government-sponsored entities, then the government's got to turn around and say, okay, well, we're not seeing this 30, 40 billion a quarter coming in. What's going to replace that from a revenue standpoint? So I don't see them being privatized, at least in the next few years. It might happen eventually, but not anytime soon. But as far as FHA, I mean, there is still caution there, and the fees are still high. There's no question about it.
Matthew, you brought up a really interesting point last time about the number of 18 to 34-year-olds living at home.
Yep.
And just not having the down payment. Are we seeing them enter the market in the short time since we spoke last, or are they still...
Nope. I wish. And as you said, it is very, very difficult. I mean, and for the same reasons that I mentioned last time, there are several reasons why they're not getting into the market. One of which is they're starting on their careers, and quite frankly, their credit isn't good enough right now to get them into a mortgage. That's point one. Point two, and as important, is the down payment requirement. It's still very, very high. Back in the day, a lot of times families and certainly parents were helping out. How were they helping out? Well, they were tapping their own home equity lines of credit in order to give their children some down payment money. That's not happening now either. Ultimately, at some point, those first-time buyers have to come back into the market. If they don't, it's going to cause a knock-on, a ripple effect through the entire housing sector. When I say that, what do I mean by that? Well, at some point, a first-time buyer will come in, and unless they are buying new construction, they're buying to a house where somebody more than likely is looking to take the first move up the ladder. And so what you're doing is you're putting a logjam in on that set of transactions. Somebody buys to move up into a bigger house maybe, and so on. And that's where we're going to get stuck. So at some point, I'm hoping they're going to come back in. I think they will. The idea that the first-time buyers or younger kids coming out of college are just going to say home ownership is silly, I disagree with that. They are delaying their purchase. They're delaying it a bit more than the last few months that since we last talked, but ultimately they will get back into the market if they can afford it. And that is also a problem which we're seeing through studies we do at the University of Washington in terms of first-time buyer affordability. King County has never been affordable. We've tracked it since the early 1990s. And on an affordability standpoint, it's very, very hard for younger people, first-time buyers, to afford to buy a home in King County.
Matthew, you mentioned new construction back there a little bit, and it seems like just in the last three to 4 weeks, it's just been going nuts down south, so probably a lot sooner in King County. But what are you seeing that spike from? Is that just from lack of inventory, so people are going new, or?
No, it is. Yet at the same time, it's kind of interesting. If you look at overall price growth last year, and certainly we were up in the maybe 12.5%, if you broke that down into resale versus new construction, most of the appreciation came in the new home market, not in the resale market. So builders have been very aggressively pricing their homes. When I say aggressively, pricing them high, not low. Yes, you're right. The situation is we're seeing from builders is that there's a lot of demand there, but they are not building speculative inventory. And this applies to small builders as well as big ones. Why are they not? Well, quite frankly, small builders are having a hard time borrowing the money to build the house, the spec home. The bigger builders, their situation's somewhat different. They're basically looking to, they're internally and being told, let's not get too far out over our skis by building too much spec inventory. Somebody wants to buy a house, we'll build it for them. But so we're in a market whereby I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, but builders have not been servicing that demand. It's really kind of surprising. Builders unto themselves have their own set of issues. Certainly land and land constraints are a big problem. There's not enough land out there, and it's becoming awfully expensive. Finished lots in King County basically doubled in value over the course of the last year.
That's just unbelievable.
Which really is. Now, what happens when you see that? Well, that has a knock-on effect into the end sale price of the home. So we're seeing new homes actually increasing in value for several reasons, one of which is the land's more expensive. Secondly, labor is more expensive now. We've got a shortage of qualified, skilled labor in terms of people to build these homes. And thirdly, material costs have been going up fairly dramatically as well. So all those things together is pushing up the price of single-family new construction homes.
Do you think that rapid appreciation last year on new construction could have been from the lapse of pre-sales taking time to build and raising prices over the 6 or 7 months?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, a lot of builders are saying we don't want to build a home and price it because what are we going to be missing out on? Perhaps we're missing out on an extra 3-4% bump in price. So they're really holding back very dramatically. So you're absolutely right.
That makes sense. That they're not listing a lot of the homes until they're complete, so they're not showing that. Interesting.
And they won't because if they're seeing prices go up, why price it potentially at a few percentage points lower than ultimately you could achieve for it?
Very good. What are your predictions for the rest of the year? What do we need to know and expect to see?
I'm hoping that at some stage we will see a jump in listings. That's going to be very important. We haven't seen it yet. Ultimately, will we? Everyone's fingers, including mine, are crossed that we will. But right now in the metro area, certainly even down in Tacoma, we're just not seeing the amount of listing activity. So I think what we need to look out for right now is we're going to see some more rational expectations in terms of seller values. I think that buyers are being a bit more knowledgeable, a bit more cognizant. They're not jumping in at the first time a home comes on the market and paying whatever. So there's being a bit of a pullback there. So we're going to see list prices drop somewhat on average. However, sell prices, I expect, are going to go up in 2014, depending on where you are, anywhere between 4 and maybe close to 6.5% this year. So we're still going to see very solid price growth. I think mortgage rates are going to slowly inch their way up through the course of the year as the Federal Reserve, again, as I mentioned earlier, starts tapering their purchase of treasuries. and mortgage-backed securities. So, but again, it won't be a vicious jump. But ultimately, I think that there's confidence in the market. There's a lot of people out there that a few years ago were not making the decision to buy or even to sell because of the fact they were just hopeful they will keep their jobs. Now people are confident about that. The market's creating new jobs, which is very important. The Boeing issue we saw last year, I think that held back a lot of potential listings up in Snohomish County. So that's a county where we've actually seen a very big rise in the amount of homes available for sale. That issue being settled for the next 7 years, very, very important. So overall, I think that there's a quiet confidence in the marketplace. So from a housing standpoint, if I hear one moan more than anything else, some people would like to be able to buy a condominium, and we're seeing very few of them being built. And quite frankly, other than the 2 projects which are being built in downtown Seattle right now, don't expect to see another one break ground this year. So those are basically your only choices.
What are your thoughts on the condo market? Obviously, low inventory, but do you see it as good investment if it's in the city?
Well, yeah, I think it is. However, it is still it's expensive.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why we're not going to see any additional projects being built is because it is very expensive to build. You can be talking about $650 a foot just to build it, which means you have to be selling that unit for between $750, $800 a foot to make any money, and that's just above where I think the market is right now.
Let's kind of talk about a little urban sprawl here. Where do you see people moving out to? Because it sounds like the affordability levels are going to continue to get unreasonable in the city.
Well, it's that drive to buy scenario is what we've seen, and we've seen it before, where it creates basically bedroom communities. I think a lot of people either drove out on I-90 or north or south on Interstate 5, and they kept on driving so they could find somewhere to buy, and that did create these bedroom communities. Is that a good thing? It's certainly not if you have to be sat in traffic all day long. But I would certainly expect to see the greatest amount of price growth in markets which are close to the job centers, to the urban markets, mainly of Seattle and Bellevue. As we head south, I think that Renton's doing particularly well right now. Renton Highlands out towards Kent is doing okay. So I think that really people are looking at where they can move, they can afford, where they can potentially look at mass transit options. And as much as I've been bemoaning mass transit in the Puget Sound for many, many years, hopefully it's going to start getting better. And as it does, I expect to see a very aggressive amount of development occurring along those lines of mass transit.
Matthew, you mentioned how expensive dirt is. Are you seeing any new builders pop up out there? It seems like Mainview and D.R. Horton are doing really good of spreading themselves out there, but are you seeing any new builders gain a market presence out here?
It's very, very hard. We used to be, for many, pretty much forever, we were a market which had an awful lot of very small builders. The average builder in Puget Sound built between 25 and 35 homes per year, but then we also had the Big Ten, the Quadrants and the Hortons and these kinds of guys. There have always been a lot of national builders which wanted to get into this marketplace, but it's a very high barrier to entry market. It's very hard to do that. However, when we saw the housing market bubble happen, a lot of land prices came down dramatically, builders went out of business, and a lot of these guys swooped in, like Toll Brothers, when they purchased Cam West, and bought up either smaller builders or bought up an awful lot of land for their own use. So we're still seeing 10, 12 very big builders out there. Just a lot of the names are going to be different. Do I see anyone else coming in? Probably going to be unlikely. We kind of have who we have right now, and I'd be surprised to see anyone of any size look to enter this market. But I think we've got enough builders here right now.
It'd be interesting to see. I mean, some of the profit margins, unless you're building, really expensive homes with the cost of dirt, it's got to be a challenge.
Well, it is, and that's going to be the problem. We were in a situation several years ago, at least around 2008, 2009. Land was cheap, labor was plentiful, costs were very low, lumber prices were low, pipe prices were low. They're all moving up now, so it does make it very, very difficult. So I think a lot of builders now are thinking about what is it they want to build. So home sizes are going to continue, I think, to get smaller. Back in the early 2000s, I was saying, professing the wonders of townhomes as being a viable alternative. A couple of people did that. I mean, Centex did it out at Snoqualmie Ridge. A few other people did as well. But for the better part, what was built wasn't necessarily what the market wanted. So I'm expecting that we'll see a lot more smaller infill developments occurring. Because these large plats of land there are out there, there aren't many. There are very, very few. Obviously, people are looking at Black Diamond, which ultimately is going to have 5,000-6,000 housing units at some point. But between now and then, you're going to see a lot of interest, even by larger builders, in small infill developments.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff. I really appreciate you calling in and giving us an update on everything going on, Matthew. Thank you.
You are always welcome. Thanks for asking me back again.
We'll have you on again soon. I can promise you that, and I hope you have a great week.
And you too, Tyler. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Matthew Gardner, always a wealth of information. Everybody, enjoy your Saturday. Thank you for tuning in. This is Clay 1180 AM and Community Real Estate Talk Show. I'm Tyler Freed. We'll catch you next week. Go Cougs.